looks like a ghost.
Well, if
On
I'd
a
known
beach
you
in
could have
Hawaii.
done that,
I didn't know you could do that.
I'd put a picture of
until-
Disneyland in the background.
Yeah, until COVID
You
happened.
definitely can do that.
The flag salute, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Paxton,
Here.
Mr. Eisenbeis,
Present.
Ms. Nelson. Here. Mr. Knox.
Here.
Dr. Ween,
Here.
Mr. Mosier,
Here.
and Mr. Christensen.
Here.
Before we move forward, I'd like to just say a few words about Mayor Dan Keck, who passed away, and his family. He was a wonderful mayor, a great family man, and a wonderful citizen. And also the Began family, who got closure on the loss of their beautiful daughter. If we could have 60 seconds of silence to contemplate these two families. Okay, correspondence or agenda changes? None? Ceremonial matters, none. Special report, Police Chief. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, John. Oh, yeah, you told me that, and I already forgot. Yes.
All right, thanks, Mayor. I wanted to point out a couple of letters that I've drafted and sent off that are in the packet here. One of them is a kudos that I know a lot of employees don't like to be recognized for certain things, but you'll see a letter in here, just a memo from the Finance Department to me, just a memo to file, but it talks about how over the years some CBS employees have voluntarily set aside a portion of their paycheck to assist with utilities for residents in need. And you'll see in that memo, since 2016, a total of $12,298 has been donated to citizens in need, and that comes from CBS employees' paychecks voluntarily. Some of the other letters in here, you'll see my response to the Alaska Marine Highway reshaping survey, or sorry, the reshaping work group led by Admiral Tom Barrett, and I just discussed, basically just gave him a background of what we have here in Sitka, our needs for ferry service and how we serve other communities, and kind of told them what a bare minimum would be that we're looking for, and then an ideal situation of what we would like to see for ferry service. And then the last two things I'd like to point out, it's the same letter, but one went to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission over at the Director of Hydropower Licensing, and another one over to the Bureau of Land Management, and this is concerning 1,281 acres of the Green Lake parcel that is, it's ours, but it's restricted to development because of FERC restrictions. And only about 200 acres of that 1,281 acres is used for the hydro plant. So we've asked FERC and the Bureau of Land Management to look at that parcel and see if we can release those FERC restrictions so we can have that land for potential development or other uses as we see fit in the future. I'm waiting on some answers there. But
Yes.
that was all.
As far as the initial stuff in the packet, I was wondering if you could highlight the flushing of wipes, because it seems like that was a major issue, and in the age of COVID.
On the radio yet?
And in And in the age of COVID, with cleaning surfaces more and more, people need to be cautioned about flushing those entities, because it's literally clogging things up. So that was another thing that if you go online and check our packet, you could see it in full color, the pictures of the clogs. So thank you.
Other comments? Okay.
I was going to say thank for the employees. I did notice that they do that and they don't toot their horns, but that's generous of city employees to do that.
Yeah, Chief Beatty.
Good evening. If I could ask the indulgence of the Assembly for a little bit of time. I actually have two items I'd like to present here tonight. First being my special report, and the second being a press release related to the Begans homicide. Good evening, Mayor Paxton and Assembly members. Normally, it is time for my quarterly report. But considering the ongoing national, state, and local discussions for police reform, accountability, transparency, excessive use of force, racial bias, allegations of past problems within the police department, including a hostile work environment, sexism, and retaliation, I have decided to address these issues directly to you, our assembly, and the citizens of Sitka. Before I start, I would like to take a moment to thank many citizens of Sitka who've expressed their outpouring of support to the police department in the past few weeks and months. Your support is so very appreciated in these times where allegations and agendas are pursued against our law enforcement community. As you are aware, there have been recent letters and newspaper articles accusing the Sitka Police Department of sexism, racism, and having a culture of excessive force. I'm compelled to point out that these letters and our articles all state issues from the past, long before my administration and tenure as your chief of police. Nonetheless, in the spirit of transparency, I would like to point out that I was hired here as your chief of police for the very reasons cited in those recent letters and articles. I have been addressing issues such as police reform, accountability, bias, use of force, long before it became the national trend to attack law enforcement on these very issues. Personnel train often on these issues of race, bias, perceptions, intervention, and de-escalation. In reforming the police department, one of the first things that must be instilled in all personnel is accountability. Accountability to oneself, to the community, and to the rules and regulations of our profession. So how does one accomplish these goals? They're accomplished by instituting and reaffirming a chain of command, adherence to policies and procedures, and understanding the very fundamentals of policing. The Sitka Police Department of today is not your department of the past. We are more diverse, representing practically every ethnicity. The department is neater and cleaner, which helps to instill a sense of pride in our work areas and the work we produce. And there is no longer a toxic environment amongst our employees. We have a training and learning atmosphere with an emphasis on teamwork, respect, and professionalism. We have established partnerships with other agencies, providing liaisons to others, and attend many meetings to build on those partnerships. We have a cadre of professionals who have training on a regular basis. Our patrol division is only one position down, and the overall experience level of our department is about 15 years. Compared to when I arrived, which at the time was 6 positions down, and overall average experience level of the patrol division was about 6 years. Because of the higher experience levels of some of our officers, the younger officers are mentored, guided, and taught proper values of policing. Officers are developed into progressive, motivated individuals with a philosophy of taking care of all issues. All these individual things may sound small, but as a whole, they are powerful. They redirect a department and establish the foundation for the department to move forward as a community-oriented department, which is what our community expects and deserves. A few weeks ago, I received an email from an old respected Sitka friend after he had read a media article. He said there needed to be a story about the top 1,000 times our police officers have helped Sitkans save lives, shoot problem bearers, and arrest bad guys. In short, the things they don't hear about. The officers of Sitka Police Department are composed and show great restraint. For example, just after the national events that sparked this narrative, Sitka police officers handled 3 gun calls in quick succession. They certainly could have had bad outcomes, but you didn't hear about them because of their restraint. Since I've been here on at least 2 occasions, officers have literally had to tackle persons to save them from jumping off the O'Connell Bridge. You didn't hear about that. We respond to assaults, domestic violence calls, and a myriad of other crimes our citizens may not like to think about. You don't hear about those either. I would like to point out a few other things that you do not hear about in my administration. Bias, sloth, and abuse of force. Why? Because they are not happening here, and that is because the professional law enforcement officers who serve you. After the latest media article a few weeks ago, I received some other advice. It was stated that we needed to rebuild the community trust. I submit to you that the trust was there before the news article, and nothing has changed in the days since. To hold this current department accountable for past administrations is not realistic or forward-thinking. To open wounds from the past does not allow us to continue our growth and move forward. The past tends to put up barriers for us, but as my administration builds its own past, the barriers will diminish. Before I close, I would like to read a quote from the father of modern-day policing, Sir Robert Peel. "The police are the public, and the public are the police. The police being only members of the public who are paid to give full-time attention to duties which are incumbent on every citizen in the interest of community welfare and existence." In closing, I would like to point out that for the last several years, Sitka has received several awards, voting us the safest city in Alaska. The mission statement of the Sitka Police Department reads, "It is the mission of the Sitka Police Department to safeguard the lives and property of our diverse community. Our mandate is to stop crime and enhance the quality of life in Sitka by delivering professional public safety services with integrity, respect, and courage." Thank you. I would like to take another moment to address a press release. I'm sure most have heard the news. We released a press release today, addressed a significant event, Jessica Bagan killer identified through DNA. In a joint case investigation with the Alaska State Troopers, the Sitka Police Department would like to announce the closure to the murder of 17-year-old Jessica Bagan. Bagan was kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and murdered in the early morning of May 4th, 1996, in what is to believe the Totem Park area. DNA evidence found on Bagan's body has linked 66-year-old Steve Allen Branch, formerly of Sitka, to her murder. On 5/3/2020, a new DNA sample had been submitted into the Combined DNA Index System, which is known as CODIS, and had a familial match to the DNA sample submitted in the Bagan's case. Officers were then able to obtain close match DNA to Branch, providing evidence that Branch had been the one to leave the DNA behind. On 8/3/2020, Alaska State Troopers contacted Branch at his home in Arkansas. When asked to volunteer a DNA sample, Branch declined to comply. The troopers then applied for a search warrant for Branch's DNA based on the results of their interview. Before troopers were able to obtain and be granted a search warrant, Branch took his own life. On 8/10/2020, a DNA sample obtained from Branch's autopsy was positively identified as the DNA left behind at the scene on Bagan's body, confirming Branch as the murderer. Further, I'd like to add and state that through the tireless efforts and the work of many investigators, we were able to bring closure and hopefully some peace to the Bagan's family. With the help of Alaska State Troopers in the advancement of DNA technology sequencing, we were able to hold someone accountable for this horrific crime.
Thank you, Chief. Comments, questions of the Chief? Okay, thank you. We're now under persons to be heard on any item not on the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, members of the Assembly, thank you. My name is David Nelson. I am the Sitka Chapter President of the Public Safety Employees Association. We are essentially the bargaining group and labor union that represents the Sitka Police Department. I feel compelled to come and speak to you all tonight based on some recent media reports that were released. And it is my position that those media reports were simply incomplete and, quite frankly, inflammatory. I think someone was watching the evening news, saw what was happening elsewhere in the country, and they decided to ride this wave of anti-police sentiment and essentially generate some cheap clickbait. For whatever reason, I don't know what their motivation is beyond that. It certainly wasn't to help this community. It certainly wasn't to help their friends and neighbors feel more secure here in Sitka. I want to make it clear that the membership of PSEA, you will note, does not get on social media. We do not go on Facebook, Instagram, or Chatters and blab about what we do on our job. Never have I seen a police officer do such a thing. We treat the members of this community with dignity, we respect their privacy, and if someone wants to send something out in social media, that's fine, they have a right to do that, but there's also a meaningful way to address those concerns, and that is not happening. Most recently, one of my officers had an incident dredged up from more than 40 years ago, 41 years ago to be exact. He was never charged with a crime, he was never indicted, and yet, again, he has to defend himself for actions taken decades ago. There was a news article published in late June here, and the quote in that news article was, "The Sitka Police Department has a history of excessive force." They cited a tasing incident that happened more than 5 years ago. Later in the article, they were interviewing someone, and that person mentioned a shooting that took place here in Sitka in 1979. The only thing I can agree with in that article is the word history. Simply that. It's all just history. Many important details were left out. How often was the officer shot at during the shooting? How many other citizens were threatened? How many lives did he save? Important details that were not mentioned. If we want to talk about history, I think we should bring up the name Wayne Barber. Wayne Barber is the only member of the Sitka Police Department to die in the line of duty, and it happened in 1960. Mr. Barber was walking up to someone's front door to serve some court paperwork. The man fired a high-powered rifle through the door, striking Officer Barber in the chest and killing him. Officer Barber left behind a wife and 4 children. He was also a private pilot and a volunteer firefighter. He had an exceptional record. Officer Barber's history is relevant today because a similar thing happened not that long ago. One of our officers was walking up to the doorway, speaking to an individual, and that man discharged a firearm through the door. It missed my officer by about, a matter of inches. I know I'm out of time, and so I'll just keep this brief. I appreciate you, and I want to extend some gratitude to all of you. I'm very grateful that you're all willing to talk to us and listen to us. And I just want to keep in the forefront of our minds that our officers act with dignity and honor. And what you're seeing on the media is certainly not coming from us, and is certainly not representative of my membership. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Sorry.
Other persons to be heard on items not on the agenda. Yeah, Dr. Wayne.
Unless there's somebody out there.
Excuse me.
Nothing is easy in this world, and if anybody tells you it is, they're ill-informed. Closure is probably one of the harder things. People feel that there is strength in closure, but yet it stirs up many things that had at one time been laid to rest. And I think that all that needs to be said tonight is that our thoughts and everything, prayers, wishes, go out to the Baggin family, and may God keep Jessica safe now that this has seen some form of completion. That being said, if anybody has seen the Alaska Economic Data Report from August, I suggest that you look it up and begin to understand the economic system or the economic situation this state is in. And you need to reflect it upon the city and its finances. As Administrator Leach has mentioned, the Alaska Marine Highway is having a very minimal showing here in Sitka and in Southeast. To make matters equally interesting, in the Alaska Anchorage Daily News, there was the fish report, and Southeast fishing, as well as lots of things around Alaska, except for maybe Bristol Bay aspects, are really not very good. And there are some areas that are already declaring disaster. And you need to see how this reflects upon Sitka and how we will proceed forward for this. Of interest, people may remember the asset purchase agreement when Sitka Community Hospital went under. And at that time, Sitka Community Hospital employees were guaranteed a job for 1 year. I can tell you now that there are a lot of employees that are now a little nervous. At that deal, we lost 70 FTEs for Sitka, and we are probably going to be losing more. And these are all stories that I'd like to see in the newspaper, by the way. Alaska economics, the fish, and the job situation. But here's one, and I'll just take a second to read. I know the bell's going to ring. But here, this is from the World Health Organization that came out today. More than 100 places reported it. And it says, delay routine dental checkups. That's what the World Health Organization recommends. And one of the things they say, just 2 sentences, there is currently no data on the spread of coronavirus from this chair. It is said calling for more research into common procedures that produce tiny floating particles that may cause infection if inhaled. There is currently no data. He added, and this is Benoit Farine, doctor, the likelihood of COVID-19 being transmitted through aerosol today is unknown. And I would view that as enormously confusing information coming out from the World Health Organization. I would still recommend to you to get your daily dental checkups. And according to Dave Nielsen, who is chair of the Alaska Dental Board, he says things are going really well with dental care in Alaska, and the transmission has got to be as close to zero as ever. So good job, Dave Nielsen and his board, and get your teeth cleaned. Thank you.
Dr. Wayne, last call for anybody who wants a person to be heard on items not on the agenda. All righty. Consent agenda, may I have a motion, please?
I need to pull item B.
Item B.
I move to approve consent item A, approve the minutes of the July 28th Assembly meeting.
Second.
Public comment? Back to the agenda, back to the assembly. Call for the roll.
And the approval of the minutes is something that you can do by unanimous
All in
voice
favor,
vote.
say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
And then all those opposed,
Yep.
say nay.
Yeah, can we now read the motion?
Mayor, I'd ask to be recused from this item. My business has a business relationship with Northern Lights.
Okay,
I move to, or are you done? Okay.
yes.
Yeah, I move to approve the application for the renewal of a retail marijuana store license for Northern Lights Indoor Gardens LLC at 1321 Sawmill Creek Road, Suites N, O, and P, and approve an application for the renewal of a standard marijuana cultivation facility license for Northern Lights Indoor Gardens LLC at 1321 Sawmill Creek Road, Suites M, N, O, and P, and forward these approvals to the Alcohol Marijuana Control Office without objection.
Second.
Public comment? Back to the assembly. Yes, Valerie.
I need to disclose that I do accounting for the entity that owns the Sawmill Creek Plaza, but I don't get a direct kickback or anything from Northern Lights. I haven't even talked to them.
You can deal with this measure. Anybody else? Call for the vote?
Okay, on the motion to approve these license renewals, Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mayor Paxton,
Yes.
Dr. Ween,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
and Mr. Christensen.
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0 on item B.
We're now at item C.
I move to appoint Jamal Floaty to an unexpired term on the GPIP Board of Directors in the category of at-large.
Second.
Public comment? Back to the assembly? Yes, Dr. Wade.
Is Jamal here? Last call for Jamal.
He isn't going to be here, but I do have a phone number if you have questions.
Well, I did have one question about his credential, which I found very new and interesting to me, and I just wanted to ask him about it. It seems potentially exciting, but it was also new information, and that is he is the proud new owner of the administration building. And so I gathered that that was, that there has been a sale transacted for that. And so I just wanted to get some update information. And even better, if he is in our listening audience, I would be happy because some of the things he said here, for him to get a special report to talk about some of his plans. In addition, if it's the same Jamal who was going to do composting, well, then I say, hooray. This is definitely something good. But I would like to hear more about the administration building since, in essence, it was a city giveaway, and it's now changed hands, and I'd like to I would very much like to hear the plans. They seem very interesting, so thank you.
Other comments from the assembly? Call for the vote?
Okay, on the motion to approve this appointment, Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Dr. Ween,
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeis,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Knox, Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
and Mayor Paxton.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on item C.
We're now on item unfinished business ordinance. Item E, can I have a motion, please?
Actually, we're on item D. We missed one there.
Sorry.
I move to reappoint Daryl Windsor to a 3-year term on the Planning Commission.
Second.
Thank you, Sarah. Public comment on this item? Back to the assembly? Dr. Wayne?
I've attended lots and lots of planning meetings, and I've seen Mr. Windsor in action, and I think that he does an outstanding job. It says that he was on the board for 9 years, so maybe he needs his head examined, but he has done an outstanding job in everything that I've seen, and I'm happy that he's upping. And the reason why that is important is because we've had 2 losses on the Planning Commission, and we're down to a bare minimum for quorum. And this is a very, very important commission, and anyone who has any interest to please come out and join the fun, because it is actually very interesting. And with Amy Ansley at the head, things just are really moving along very well. It's a very intelligent, articulate group.
All the commissions are important, but the planning commission is certainly one of the most important and profound ones that we have. Call for the vote?
Okay, on the motion to approve this appointment, Dr. Ween,
Yes.
Mr. Knox? Yes. Mr. Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
And Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on item D. Kevin, we're having a little bit of difficulty hearing you. I have a text into Grant to see if he can help with that, just an FYI.
We are now at item E. May I have a motion, please?
I move to approve ordinance 2020-43 on second and final reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2021, the GPIP haul-out.
Second.
Public comment? Back to the assembly? Yes, Dr. Wayne?
I'll remind people that this is a consultant fee of $100,000. And we have already spent considerable money with P&D, et cetera. And I will be anxiously looking for the results of this consultant and see what they actually have to offer. Because so many times we get consultants and they seem to really kind of say the same things that we've already known and have consulted about in the past. So hopefully we will get some new information and a bang for our buck. And we certainly do love consultants. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Administrator, but I think this is not a consult, this is a issue to actually do the design for the ramp in the washdown. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mayor. It will be a consulting service to help with that
But
engineering
specific
design for the
outcome,
slip and the ramp.
Will it come from the assembly?
Yes, just as I mean, I understand the frustration with consultants, and I definitely have felt that. I kind of felt that with the Granite Creek contract, but this sounds to me like it's more of an engineering services, which is not really, I mean, I guess technically it's still a consultant, but it's an engineering job, which is, much more of a distinct product that we are looking for that has to be done.
Other comments from the assembly? Call for the vote?
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2020-43 on second and final reading, Ms. Nelson?
No.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Dr. Ween?
No.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
And Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes 5-2 on item E.
And now at item F, may I have a motion, please?
I move to approve emergency ordinance 2020-44 on first reading, temporarily authorizing the mayor to modify and/or waive various sections of the Sitka General Code dealing with public meetings and teleconference participation in those public meetings in order to protect the life, health, welfare, and property of elected and appointed officials, staff, and the public during the government-declared COVID-19 public health emergency.
Public comment? Thank you. Need a second?
Second.
Yeah. How we doing? We're doing okay, Marshall. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good. On this extra powers that we're talking about granting the mayor, what does that entail? I mean,
Yep. Why don't we have the administrator give you, it's.
Just for the record, this isn't granting any extra powers. This is doing some house cleaning from the remote meetings that we had to do that were essentially not following code that said we had to be physically present for meetings that we had in the past after the emergency declaration. So this is cleaning up the meetings that we had remotely when we were all on the screen.
okay, so this grants no powers that if they decide, because of this pandemic, that we're going to shut something down or
So,
force people to wear masks or something without,
Go back and forth.
it coming and being voted on?
Marshall, so we can't do a back and forth.
Oh, I'm sorry.
For public testimony, so,
But it was a good comment for the public. Basically, it allows me to approve some members who exceed the number of times they call in on for the meeting rather than being present. Is that accurate? Yeah, it's just. so
Okay, thank you. That's all I want to make sure nobody has any
I have no
powers
power.
over the people that they shouldn't have, so thank you.
Concur with that, my friend. Okay, good. Back to the assembly now. Yeah, Valerie?
I've never been a fan of retroactive ordinances, and I disagree that this only allows the mayor to excuse us if we've missed too many damn meetings. And I kind of get tired of the thing that everything's an emergency, and it's been an emergency since March 1st, and we're going to have an emergency ordinance that we're going to pass on one reading that only, one person has looked at the agenda and figured out, oh yeah, the word retroactive is there. It's kind of like we're trying to cover our tracks because guess what? The last meeting that we had, the agenda got changed. And this also gives you the power to change the agenda and not meet the Wednesday noon deadline the way I read it. And I may be wrong, and I would like an explanation from our municipal attorney about retroactive ordinances. And this, to me, just seems totally wrong. Thank you.
If I can make a comment before you, I want no power to do anything but just take care of people's missing meetings and that kind of stuff. Yeah. Yeah, please, would you, and then we'll get to you, Steve.
You can have mine.
This emergency ordinance has been generated over a number of meetings within City Hall between the clerk's office and myself, and comments made by other assembly members about some of the procedural problems we were passing ourselves through because of the COVID-19 problem. In particular, we've had a lot of public meetings that were participated by assembly members telephonically and visually that are contrary to our code, that an assembly member is only supposed to participate telephonically or by teleconference 4 times in a calendar year, and they can only do it twice in a year. And then if the mayor participates telephonically, the mayor is not supposed to preside over those meetings. Now, under circumstances that we found ourselves under, I believe it was appropriate to because of the COVID-19, to have people participate remotely. But I looked throughout other jurisdictions and found that other jurisdictions had done a similar process of cleaning up past actions that were forced on them by the COVID-19 by initiating an emergency ordinance that said, while we're under this pandemic, let's give our presiding officer the power to say, okay, everybody can appear telephonically, and they don't have to do so. They don't have to meet the 4 meeting rule or the 2 meeting rule in a row, or the mayor can sit teleconference-wise and preside over those meetings. And, we could continue to ignore this and allow things to happen. But frankly, on my suggestion, I said, let's be transparent here. Let's bring this to the public. Let's have an emergency ordinance that goes along with our emergency that says the mayor can say, hey, while we're under this pandemic, let's only have, we can, every meeting, like Kevin Knox is appearing teleconference-wise at every meeting, and he's not in violation of our code. Now, these emergency ordinances expire after 61 days. But you can make that declaration, and you're not doing so today. My suggestion would be for you to consider this ordinance today, and if you pass it today, then direct myself and the administrator and the clerk to come back to the mayor with a list of retroactive, say, hey, this happened, this is all okay type of declaration that made by the mayor related to the